seen it too many times. I've got a whole pattern of disappointment with people who I thought, as this evil has been rising in America, would be the kind of hero that we need to push it back. The biggest disappointment of this kind I think had my whole life is had to do with Robert Mueller. Uh, when he got the job as being the special prosecutor uh, for Donald Trump, I thought for sure Trump's goose was cooked. I was picturing uh, something that would be as heroic as what Archibald Nichol, well, whatever his Archibald Cox and anyway, the prosecutors of Watergate scandal bagged their president. I was picturing that because, for one thing, uh, the uh, the picture of him who he had been. I mean, he just looked like he was had the biography out of Hollywood scripts, and guy who left Princeton and volunteered to go to Vietnam for a very patriotic and manly reason, as I recall. And then the way he had enforced the FBI, and everybody talked about his great integrity, and and what happened to him? I mean, I was picturing something completely different from what he actually did. He was the person who visibly was standing between us and a great advance of fascism against American rule of law. And what did he do? I mean, the report itself was pussyfooted around. Um, it did not lay out like they did with Nixon, basically telling Congress this is you should impeach and convict him for these things. He pussyfooted around. In terms of Russian collusion, he drew the most cautious, even though it was clear there was Russian collusion. It was very weak. Uh, Not what you would do if we had uppermost in your mind. There is this destructive force right here at the top of the power structure of America, and it's my job to protect the country from this destructive force. Then when the thing came out, when the report came out that I had thought was going to really just blow everything away, and the attorney general to whom he has to, by law, that's the process, he submits it to the attorney general, he basically destroyed it by misrepresenting it and sitting on it. And how did the great Robert Mueller respond to this fascistic move? Well, he apparently wrote some kind of private message of complaint to the attorney general. I don't think that's what I would have done. I mean, that was the duty to save the country led to a report that was supposed to be available to the American people for a particular purpose that has to do with preserving our democracy. And the attorney general just blunted it, blocked it, essentially deceived the people. And Robert Mueller just wrote a letter of complaint for private purposes. And then there's Merrick Garland. When he was appointed, I didn't see him quite as the warrior I saw, but I thought this is the guy who's obviously passionate about the rule of law and about justice. He said all the right things, and I believed that's where he was coming from. But he was so weak about pursuing um, the organizers of the insurrection leading up to Trump. He's basically forfeited a battle that we could have won. At least I think we could have won. who knows with the Supreme Court, what they eventually did. But if Garland had said, okay, I just took an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. And what bigger threat to the Constitution of the United States has there ever been than what this guy Donald Trump did about trying to overturn an election, which is a direct assault on the constitutional order? Job one is to address the biggest threat, which Congress did not take care of because the Senate Republicans made sure he didn't get convicted, which would have meant he could never run for president again. The weakness of Garland. I mean, I still think he's probably a man of great integrity, but he shrank from the battle. It was his job to fight. The oath he had just taken, there was nothing that should have been higher on his list than make sure that those who tried to overturn the Constitution do not get away with it. Instead, he waited 2 years before he was pushed into it by the January 6th committee. Why such weakness? What is it? What is it about the pro-democracy, pro-rule of law side that makes it so difficult for us to get the people on the field who will fight the fight that needs to be fought the way it needs to be fought? And now Christopher Wray shows us, that still afflicts the pro-democracy, pro-rule of law side of the country. I mean, why? I mean, I don't know that I would want to be in their position necessarily, though actually I think I would. I would be somewhat afraid. I mean, Trump has a way of inciting violence, and I don't. But I thought I was maybe taking that chance back in 1994 on the radio, where in a very pro Oliver North part of Virginia, I spoke very forcefully against what I thought Oliver North represented, which was a kind of a fascistic thing, though I wouldn't have called it that then. And when I came out of the radio station, I looked around to see if there was anybody lying in wait, some sniper type. That was the only time. It turned out that I needn't have worried that this isn't that kind of an area, evidently. But I did worry, and I was willing to do that in spite of it. So I like to think that if I had been Merrick Garland or I'd been Robert Mueller before him, and now with Wray, I'd like to think that I would stand and fight and actually go on the offensive, because basically the oath of office depends ultimately on the pro-democracy, pro-rule of law side winning the battle. And the way it hasn't been fought, it shouldn't be entirely surprising that somehow we've been losing the battle. And this presidential election presents. I mean, I can't tell what the future holds. But I'm not seeing mobilizing anything that's going to really stop this guy from dismantling American democracy, starting with Kash Patel at the FBI. So how do we get somebody out there on the stage, or a whole succession of people, but I think one person paramount, out there that's pressing the battle, not even just standing one's ground, which is, what I would have had Wray do was stand his ground. I'm not leaving. I'm on and you've got no cause. Challenge the president to justify, which gets into an argument about all the evidence about Trump's having stolen highly classified documents and behaved with them in a way that jeopardizes national security. How does a guy survive that? Well, he had a judge he happened to draw out of the pack who was about as corrupt as one could imagine. She was just Trump's kind of a guy, loyal to him, servile to him, and not to the rule of law. He lucked out in so many ways, but part of the picture was that the people who might have been fierce against him shrank back from the battle. Mueller doesn't raise the stink that what William Barr did for Trump should have raised. Garland doesn't go after Trump. Wray does not make Trump pay a price for turning the FBI into an instrument of the rule of law, into the instrument of a tyrant to be used against his enemies. How do we get the right voices out there doing battle, behaving the way Robert Mueller should have behaved, the way Merrick Garland should have behaved, going after him? Everything that they could to protect the nation from this lawless political leader with a big devoted following that was a clear threat to the survival of American democracy. How do we get those voices? Let's begin by insisting on those voices. We who aren't in a position to be those voices should be calling out for some such thing to arise and take him on, take the whole thing on in a way that vents the anger of the people. And that's another thing that we see now. The guy who shot the CEO of a terrible healthcare company tapped into a rage in the country. And we can see that from all the celebration of it. But in the video just before this, I discuss how we've got a problem that the Democratic pro-democracy side has not expressed the anger, the righteous anger that the American people should feel. For example, about our healthcare system. And the real ones to blame for it are not the pirates like this healthcare CEO who take advantage of our the failure of our political system to do what every other advanced democracy has done and provide good healthcare for their people. The people are angry about the healthcare situation, and justifiably so. And instead of going and killing CEOs, they should be throwing out of power the Republican Party that did everything they could to prevent the American people from getting what everybody else gets that would solve that problem. The American people get angry, justifiably so, but the force of fascism directs their anger against phony objects. And then if you don't get on the pro-democracy side, people rising up who will press the battle in a way that expresses what the people want expressed. When we go to a John Wayne movie and we wait for the shootout, we know how we're going to feel at the end when John Wayne is still standing there. That's what we want. We create these dramas between good and evil because we want good to triumph over evil. And that means we want, well, it depends on how we understand evil. The problem with America now is that the people on the right have mistaken the evil for the good. They may think that if the Republican Party repeals Obamacare 60 times, that somehow they're representing the good. It shouldn't be that hard for a heroic voice to help make the American people understand that the Republican behavior around healthcare was completely indefensible, showed no interest in doing for the American people what they deserve to have done by their political representatives. So one side mistakes the evil for the good. That's the people on the right that support repealing Obamacare, while they're enraged about the situation, rightly so. And meanwhile, the people on the pro-democracy, pro-rule of law side do not stand up and direct people's rage at the right target. That's the political task now. And it's gotten more difficult and more dangerous because we lost this battle. And we lost this battle because we did not stand up and fight in all the ways that we should fight. What's with all these people? What's with Mitt Romney, a man of faith who believes in certain things? I believe that he believes in them. And who knows what Donald Trump represents? Why was he so muted in using what platform he has? I mean, I don't ask that question so much of George W. Bush. I see him as so profoundly flawed. I mean, his presidency advanced us very far along toward Trump. So I'm not surprised he would not rally to defend democracy when he did a lot to damage it. But Mitt Romney's another thing. Why is he another one of these cases of cowardice? I mean, he said he's worried about his children, his grandchildren or something being targets. Yeah, well, sorry, fella. I'm sorry that you have been put into this position where the survival of American democracy is at stake, and you happen to be one of those people who could strike a blow which is much bigger than that of the average person. So you do it. Well, that's not how he thought about it. And there's a list of other, Haley, Nikki Haley. I mean, I didn't expect much of William Barr. I mean, he should have been impeached. I mean, his behavior as Attorney General is the most scandalous behavior we've ever had in an Attorney General. I feel fairly confident of that, though what's coming up next might be a lot worse even, just because it's taking fascism a few steps forward to outright go after the president's political enemies. This is a battle for the survival of a lot of things that we hold sacred. And if we can't rally ourselves for defending things like justice and the will of the people and democracy and just plain decency, when those things are being attacked, why aren't we hearing voices that are powerful and angry and that summon the anger of the American people that was directed at the CEO and being murdered, and to do it in a way which leads to justice? The question that was raised by this assassination and then the reaction to it was, what's going on with the American people that all these people have these feelings, and yet this is our system of law says this is murder, and that we put out an APB for this guy, and we're glad when he's taken into custody and he's going to be prosecuted, and that's the way it's supposed to be. And our political our political leaders celebrate that the rule of law must prevail over someone taking the law into their own hands. And what I propose is that's not necessarily quite how we see it. How we see it actually depends on our sense of the level of justice and injustice that's built into the foundations of the system. So when it comes to American health care, that is greatly warped by injustice. It's not the way it should be. And so we don't know quite where we stand with somebody who's heading a company that is the worst in the country for denying coverage to people at the cost of people's lives and driving people into bankruptcy. It's a terrible thing. And the people are angry. But their anger, if we're going to get justice out of it, not injustice, has to be based on an understanding of why things are screwed up like this. And the answer is the Republican Party has refused to address this problem. They've done everything they could for 30 years to prevent any kind of new healthcare policy from being enacted. And then they fought every inch of the way to prevent our addressing a huge healthcare problem, which was costing the country a lot of money and 50,000 lives or 35,000 extra lives lost a year. And we're paying twice as much. I mean, it was an obvious problem, and the Republican Party has prevented us from addressing it well. A voice has to arise that helps people understand what the Republican Party was doing about health care is the problem. They're the people who are arranging things so that the well-being of the American people takes a back seat to the enrichment of certain corporate interests. Show people that. I mean, it's basically the truth. It's not like there's no evidence. It's not like it's not plausible. I'm thinking, for example, about all the people who that one heard about who were for Trump or Bernie Sanders. There are people who are looking for some kind of a voice about, who to be angry with. Bernie Sanders was not somebody who would win the presidency, but his message about the role of money in corrupting our politics was pretty spot on. And then the role of the Republican Party in being the advocate, and now the role of the Republican Party in giving us essentially something even further in that direction in the form of Trumpian fascism, with billionaires being the main people around the president. That people are now saying, they're not just billionaires anymore, now they're oligarchs. This is not the direction that Americans should be wanting to go. But who's going to point it out to them and point it out in such a way that their anger at the injustice of the world, their sense that things are not being done fairly for them, gets directed to where the real unfairness is coming from? Replacing Christopher Wray with Kash Patel is not fair to the American people. It robs the American people of something of high value. The right voice would explain the huge value there is of this kind of an FBI rather than this kind that Trump is clearly trying to create. Anger should be directed at that which is stealing from us what is sacred. Where are the voices to direct us in that fashion? When I launched my website in 2005, nonesoblind.org, I launched it with a piece called What America Needs Now, a prophetic social movement. Fascism was already visibly rising in America at that time. And prophetic in that context meant, as in the Bible, calling out the evil of an evil power. That's what the prophets did. That's what was called for in 2005 when we were not nearly so far down this dark trail. We were getting things like being lied into a war. We were getting things like a torture memo and a whole list of things that are pretty ugly and should not have been tolerated. But we weren't as far along as this. There's a line in Yeats that I quote frequently. The good lack all conviction, while the evil are filled with a passionate intensity. And indeed, a wounded man like Donald Trump has a passionate intensity to extend the range of his domination and to put himself over people. He is filled with a passionate intensity to behave in ways that make the world consistently more broken. We need to have a passionate intensity on the other side. The good lack all conviction. I think that when you've got the kind of conviction that's required in a situation where this is the nature of the battle, it's not just a polite conviction. It is a desire to do battle, to fight and win. And the way you win in a democracy is you get the American people, if they still have some allegiance to the good, to see that what they're supporting is the enemy of the good. There needs to be such a passion about the good, like what Wray is supposedly there to defend, that you naturally go into battle against that which would destroy it. That's what our heroes do in the great epics of our time. That's what they do in Star Wars. That's what they do in the Lord of the Ring trilogy. That's what they do in Avatar. The hero goes into battle and he expresses our feelings of we don't want this evil, destructive thing making our world less good. The world of the Jedi is much better than the world of the Empire. The men are made into machines, extensions of the evil power. In the Star Wars, our heroes are dressed like space hippies, earthy, alive, like the Ewoks. Same kind of division in Avatar. We identify with the world with all this beauty in it, all this interconnected web of life and this beautiful planet that this other evil force is plundering. We want our hero to go into battle, and he does. We want that now. I want that now. We need it now. I'd like to offer you on my website an integrated view of our situation as Americans and more fundamentally as a civilization-creating creature on this planet, where we may or may not get our act together in time to avoid destroying ourselves. So there's a picture there that's really my passion, is to get out there. I mean, I love all the little things, like how to connect the murder of a CEO with the surrender of the director of the FBI, because there is a coherent picture out here, and the heart of that coherent picture is that we have a battle between good and evil. We can see it in those terms. We can define it in ways that actually hold water in social scientific, social theoretical terms. There is a battle between two coherent forces going on here, and it's represented by democracy versus fascism at this immediate level. And we are forfeiting far too much of that battle, because we are not pressing the battle, because too many people like Wray and Garland and Robert Mueller shrank from the battle that we needed for them to be fighting. Where's the guy or the gal to wage the battle the way we need it waged? Bye-bye.